The crack of gunfire echoed across Westridge Elite Shooting Club as a woman in simple jeans and a faded green cardigan walked through the entrance, a stark contrast to the sea of tactical gear and designer shooting accessories that dominated the prestigious facility. Sarah Chen might as well have been wearing a neon sign that read "Outsider" as she approached the mahogany registration desk with quiet determination in her dark eyes. The young man behind the counter barely glanced up from his computer, his expression morphing from boredom to mild amusement when he finally registered her presence. "Ma'am, I think you're lost. The gardening club meets across town," he said, triggering snickers from a group of men in expensive shooting vests loitering nearby. Sarah ignored the commentary, placing her completed application form on the polished surface. "I'd like to register for a membership," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "I've completed all the required paperwork." The attendant's eyebrows shot up as he reluctantly took the form. The snickering behind her grew louder, drawing the attention of a tall, imposing figure who detached himself from a conversation across the room. "Jenkins, what seems to be the problem?" The voice carried the confidence of someone accustomed to instant obedience. Maxwell Grant, club president and CEO of Westridge Development, approached with the swagger of a man who owned not just the building, but everyone in it. "No problem, sir," Jenkins replied, "just explaining to this lady that perhaps she's confused about our facility's purpose." Grant's cold gray eyes assessed Sarah, taking in her worn sneakers and the simple canvas bag slung over her shoulder. His mouth curved into what could generously be called a smile, though it never reached his eyes. "I don't believe we've had the pleasure," he said, extending a manicured hand. "Maxwell Grant, president of this establishment." "Sarah Chen," she replied, her grip firmer than he expected. "Well, Miss Chen," Grant said, retrieving his hand and wiping it discreetly on his tailored pants. "Westridge is a specialized facility for serious enthusiasts and professionals. Our membership fees alone start at 5 figures annually. Plus, there's a comprehensive vetting process." He gestured vaguely toward her simple attire. "Perhaps the public range downtown would be more appropriate for your skill level." The room had gone quiet now, all eyes fixed on the unusual confrontation. Sarah stood motionless, her expression betraying nothing as Grant continued his practiced dismissal. "Jenkins, please return Miss Chen's application and direct her to facilities better suited to beginners." He emphasized the last word with theatrical precision, drawing appreciative chuckles from his audience. "Actually," came a new voice from behind Grant, "the club bylaws state that any applicant meeting the basic safety requirements must be allowed a qualifying round before rejection." The speaker, an older man with weathered features and a club staff uniform, stepped forward. "It's in the charter, sir." Grant's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Thank you for the reminder, James," he said, his tone suggesting it was anything but welcome. He turned back to Sarah with a predatory smile. "Very well. Perhaps a demonstration would be instructive for everyone." 20 minutes later, Sarah stood at firing position 3, a loaned club pistol in her hands, while nearly every member present had gathered to witness what they assumed would be an entertaining failure. Grant himself stood nearby, arms crossed over his expensive shooting jacket. "Standard qualification is 3 shots at 20 yards, he announced loudly. "Though perhaps we should start you at 10, Miss Chen?" More laughter rippled through the spectators. Sarah made no reply, simply adjusting her stance and raising the weapon with practiced precision that went unnoticed by most observers. As she sighted down the range, memories flickered behind her eyes. Different targets, different stakes, a lifetime ago. The first shot cracked through the air, the second and third following, in such rapid succession that they seemed almost a single sound. Absolute silence fell over the previously boisterous crowd. Downrange, through the clearing smoke, 3 bullet holes formed a tight triangle in the absolute center of the target, a grouping so perfect it seemed mechanically produced rather than human-made. "Beginner's luck," Grant muttered, his smile vanishing as he stomped toward the target for closer inspection. Sarah lowered the pistol, safing it with automatic precision as her eyes met those of James, the older staff member. Something passed between them, a silent acknowledgement that carried the weight of shared secrets. What no one in the stunned crowd yet realized was that Sarah Chen hadn't come to Westridge Elite Shooting Club to impress anyone. She'd come for justice that was generations overdue. And that perfect triangle of bullet holes was merely her introduction. Sarah drove home in silence, her mind replaying the stunned expressions that had followed her impeccable shots. The faded blue sedan she navigated through evening traffic was as unassuming as her appearance, a deliberate choice for a woman who had once moved through the world like a ghost. Her apartment, tucked into a modest complex on the outskirts of Westridge County, was sparsely furnished but meticulously organized. She locked the door behind her, drew the blinds, and only then allowed her shoulders to relax from their rigid posture. The wall calendar caught her attention. Today's date circled in red, exactly 50 years since her grandfather had lost everything. "I made contact, Grandpa," she whispered to the framed photograph of an elderly Asian man standing proudly before a sprawling farmhouse, "just like I promised." Sarah moved to her desk and slid aside a stack of environmental impact reports, revealing a weathered leather journal beneath. The pages within contained her grandfather's painstaking documentation, land surveys, ownership deeds, and correspondence with local officials dating back decades. Paper-clipped to one yellowed page was a newspaper clipping announcing the construction of Westridge Elite Shooting Club, built atop what had once been the fertile heart of Chen family farms. She touched the faded headline gently. Few people knew that before Westridge became a playground for the wealthy, it had been home to one of the most productive agricultural operations in the county. Fewer still remembered how dozens of immigrant families had lost their livelihoods when the water was mysteriously diverted, crops failed, and tax assessments suddenly tripled. Sarah opened her laptop and connected a secure drive. Files appeared showing satellite imagery of the region over time, the gradual transformation from vibrant farmland to parched earth, then to manicured grounds surrounding the exclusive club. One folder contained personnel files, including Maxwell Grant's history before becoming the club's president. His previous position, county water commissioner during the critical years of the drought that had devastated local farms. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Risky move today. He's asking questions. James, the equipment manager who had intervened." Sarah hadn't expected an ally inside, especially not so soon. She typed back carefully, "Need access to club archives. Original land surveys." The response came quickly. "Dangerous. Those records aren't digital. Locked room behind Grant's office." Sarah sighed, leaning back in her chair. She had anticipated obstacles, but physical documents under Grant's direct supervision complicated matters. She opened another folder on her computer containing military records, heavily redacted, but with enough visible text to confirm what those at the club would find unbelievable. Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, U.S. Army Special Operations, distinguished marksman with specialized training in covert infiltration. That life seemed distant now. After her medical discharge, she had retreated from the world until her grandfather's deathbed confession had given her new purpose. "The land wasn't lost, Sarah," he had whispered through labored breaths. "It was stolen. The proof is in their own records." Her grandfather hadn't lived to see his name cleared, but the promise she'd made to him burned brighter than ever. Westridge's elite members saw only a simple woman out of her depth. None would suspect she had once eliminated high-value targets from distances that seemed impossible, or that she had infiltrated facilities far more secure than their precious club. Sarah removed her cardigan, revealing a lattice of scars across her left shoulder, souvenirs from her final mission. She began her nightly exercise routine, movements precise despite the old injuries. Tomorrow would require perfect control, physically and emotionally. As she worked through familiar drills, her mind calculated angles and approaches. The club's annual charity tournament was 3 weeks away. According to James's text, every member of importance would attend, including the county officials who had facilitated the land seizures decades ago. Some still held office. Others had moved to lucrative private sector positions with companies that had benefited from the redistribution of Chen family land. The tournament would be her opportunity, not just to access the records, but to confront those responsible in the most public manner possible. Sarah completed her exercises and returned to the desk, studying the club's floor plan that James had sent earlier. "Patience and precision," she murmured, the mantra from her military days still automatic. One shot, one opportunity. Only this time, her target wasn't a person, but the elaborate web of corruption that had destroyed her family's legacy. And unlike her missions abroad, this one would be executed in plain sight, before the very people who believed she didn't belong. The following morning, Sarah returned to Westridge with her membership paperwork officially approved, a formality the club couldn't avoid after her qualifying performance. She arrived deliberately early, when the main range would be nearly empty. Most members preferred afternoon sessions after business lunches. James was organizing equipment behind the counter, his weathered hands moving with practiced efficiency despite their slight tremor. When he spotted Sarah, he gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the security camera above before speaking loudly. "Miss Chen, your orientation packet. Please review the safety protocols before proceeding to the range." He slid a folder across the counter, maintaining a professional distance. Sarah paged through the materials, pausing when she felt something tucked between the shooting range rules and membership directory, a small note with a hastily drawn map and the words, "Storage Room B, 1, 15 p.m. "Everything seems in order," she said, closing the folder. "I'd like to familiarize myself with the facility, if that's permitted." "Of course," James replied. "Members have access to all common areas." The emphasis on common was slight, but unmistakable. Sarah spent the next hour methodically exploring publicly accessible spaces, mentally mapping exits, blind spots in the security camera coverage, and staff movements. She practiced at the indoor range, deliberately scoring well but not exceptionally. Good enough to belong, not good enough to attract further attention. Her shots formed consistent patterns that any experienced shooter would recognize as competent but unexceptional, a calculated performance to maintain her cover. At precisely 1:12 p.m., she made her way toward the maintenance corridor. Timing her movements between security sweeps, James had indicated on his hand-drawn map. The hallway was deserted, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as she passed storage closets and utility rooms. Storage Room B was tucked in a forgotten corner of the building's original structure, predating the recent luxury renovations that had transformed the modest club into an ostentatious showcase of wealth. She tested the door handle, unlocked, as promised. Inside, James was already waiting, surrounded by dusty equipment and boxes labeled with dates stretching back decades. His eyes darted nervously to the door as he motioned her closer, his weathered face lined with tension. "We don't have much time," he whispered. "Grant usually inspects the trophy room at 2. "Why are you helping me?" Sarah asked directly, her military training making her cautious of unexpected allies. "What's your connection to this?" James's expression hardened, the genial maintenance man replaced by someone with steel in his spine. "I knew your grandfather. Worked his land for 20 years before the drought conveniently destroyed everything except Grant's properties." He pulled back his sleeve, revealing a faded dragon tattoo. "Chen Weilong saved my life in Vietnam. We served in the same unit, him as a medic, me as a frightened kid from Iowa who'd never seen combat." He traced the dragon's outline with gnarled fingers. "Your grandfather gave me this when we returned, said it would protect me. And when he needed protection years later, I could do nothing but watch as they systematically destroyed him." Sarah studied him carefully, assessing both his words and the micro-expressions that might betray deception. She saw only pain and long-suppressed anger in his weathered face. "And now, why risk your position here after all this time?" "I'm dying," he stated flatly. "Cancer. 6 months, maybe less. Nothing left to lose." He pulled a folded blueprint from inside his maintenance jacket. "Original club construction plans. The archives are here." He pointed to a small room adjacent to Grant's office. "Climate-controlled security keypad. Code changes weekly." Sarah committed the layout to memory, her trained mind automatically calculating approach angles and security vulnerabilities. "And the tournament? 3 weeks from Saturday. Every founding member will attend, plus the county commissioners, past and present." His voice took on a bitter edge. "They gather every year to congratulate themselves on their community service while drinking on land they stole." A noise in the hallway silenced them both. Sarah moved to the door, listening intently with the heightened senses developed during covert operations. Footsteps approached, then receded down an adjacent corridor. She turned back to James, who had grown visibly paler. "Grant's suspicious," James warned. "After yesterday's shooting display, he's been asking about you. Military records, background checks. He's called in favors with friends in local government." "Let him look," Sarah replied calmly. "My official record is carefully sanitized." Years in special operations had taught her how to create cover identities that withstood scrutiny. The technical writer background they'd find would be thoroughly documented, if unremarkable. James nodded, but his concern remained evident. "There's something else." He hesitated, then continued reluctantly. "The wall. Grant's planning to challenge you." Sarah's expression remained neutral, though something flickered in her eyes. "The wall?" An impossible shooting challenge at the tournament's conclusion. 1,000 yards, with environmental variables controlled by Grant himself. No one's ever completed it. James's voice dropped further. It's his favorite humiliation tactic for anyone who threatens his domain. He adjusts the wind simulation and barometric pressure settings to ensure failure, then uses the public defeat to reinforce the hierarchies he's built. James hesitated, fiddling nervously with a screwdriver from his pocket. There's something else you should know. Grant isn't just a businessman who acquired land through questionable means. He was military too, supposedly special forces, though he never mentions which unit or when. The wall was designed to military specifications. It's like he's testing for people with training. Sarah completed his thought, the implication clear. Grant wasn't just suspicious. He was actively screening for people with specialized skills. A cold smile ghosted across Sarah's face. Perfect. James looked startled. Perfect? This is a trap, Sarah. He's setting you up. Every trap can be reversed, Sarah replied, her voice taking on a hardness that made James step back slightly. The wall isn't just his screening tool now. It's his vulnerability, his pride on public display, with media present and witnesses who will remember exactly what happens. She checked her watch. We've been here too long. Return to your regular duties. I'll establish a normal practice pattern over the next 2 weeks. Nothing exceptional, nothing suspicious. As they prepared to leave, James caught her arm gently. Your grandfather never gave up, you know. Even after they took everything, he kept gathering evidence, kept believing that someday someone would care about justice. His eyes, rheumy with age, held a fierce pride. He would recognize you in this moment. The same steel. The next 2 weeks saw Sarah establishing a careful routine at Westridge, arriving at predictable times, demonstrating consistent but unremarkable skills, and cultivating a persona of quiet determination that members began to grudgingly respect, if not welcome. She overheard snippets of conversation about her, that Asian woman or the outsider, but the outright mockery had faded to wary observation. Grant, however, watched her with increasing intensity, his initial dismissiveness replaced by calculated scrutiny. Sarah could feel his eyes tracking her movements across the range, analyzing her technique with predatory focus. On her 8th visit, Grant made his move. Sarah was adjusting her stance at firing position 4 when his reflection appeared in the polished brass shell casing display beside her. Miss Chen, he said, voice dripping with artificial warmth. Your dedication is admirable. Most newcomers don't practice with such discipline. Sarah turned, maintaining her carefully crafted expression of mild deference. Thank you, Mr. Grant. I believe in consistent practice. Indeed. His eyes were cold despite his smile. I've been reviewing your application materials. Fascinating background, technical writer with no previous competitive shooting experience. He leaned closer, invading her personal space with deliberate intimidation. Yet your form suggests specialized training. My father taught me basics when I was young, Sarah replied, the prepared half-truth flowing easily. I've studied instructional videos since joining. Grant's smile tightened. How fortunate that you're a quick study. Perhaps you'd be interested in our upcoming charity tournament? We encourage members of all skill levels to participate. The invitation was a trap, delivered with such transparent calculation that Sarah almost admired his directness. I wouldn't want to embarrass myself against your championship-level members, she demurred. Nonsense, Grant insisted, his tone making it clear this wasn't actually a request. In fact, I've taken the liberty of adding your name to the participant list. The entry fee has been waived for you, as our newest member. Over Grant's shoulder, Sarah noticed James entering the range, his expression carefully neutral as he listened to their exchange. That's very generous, she said, meeting Grant's gaze steadily. I'd be honored to participate. Excellent. Grant's smile widened to reveal perfect teeth. The tournament concludes with our special challenge event, the wall. Perhaps you'll be the first newcomer to attempt it. After Grant departed, James approached under the pretense of checking equipment. He's never waived the $5,000 entry fee before, he murmured while adjusting her lane's target return system. He's planning something. Sarah nodded almost imperceptibly. He's found enough inconsistencies in my background to be suspicious, but not enough to confirm his fears. She chambered around with precise movements. The tournament is still our best opportunity. All targets in one location. There's more, James whispered, his back to the nearest camera. County Commissioner Bennett requested special security for the event. They're bringing in private contractors, armed. Sarah processed this information with outward calm, while her mind rapidly recalculated risk assessments. Commissioner Bennett had been deputy water commissioner during her grandfather's eviction. His signature appeared on multiple questionable documents in her possession. They're nervous, she concluded quietly. After all these years, they still fear exposure. James gave a grim nod. The tournament program was finalized yesterday. They've scheduled a special ceremony honoring the founding vision of Westridge Development. Bennett will present Grant with the Community Service Award for transforming underutilized agricultural land into an economic engine for the county. The irony might have been amusing if it weren't so painful. Her family's generational legacy recast as worthless land, their dispossession celebrated as progress. Sarah fired 3 perfectly placed shots in rapid succession, channeling her tightly controlled anger into flawless execution. They've built careers, fortunes, and reputations on stolen land, she said, her voice barely audible over the range's ventilation system. It's fitting they'll lose everything in the same place. Tournament week arrived with a flurry of activity at Westridge. Temporary grandstands erected, media stations established, and security checkpoints installed at every entrance. Sarah observed the preparations with methodical attention, noting the positions of cameras, guards, and potential obstacles to her plan. On Wednesday afternoon, she deliberately stayed late, practicing long after most members had departed. As darkness fell, only a skeleton crew of maintenance staff remained, James among them. Their choreographed encounter in the club's dimly lit locker room appeared coincidental to any watching eyes. Security protocols are updated, James murmured, pretending to check a faulty locker near hers. Grant's office keypad now requires both code and fingerprint. Sarah absorbed this setback without visible reaction. And the archives? Still accessible through his office. No additional security beyond the outer door. James slipped a small paper into her towel as he turned to leave. Tomorrow night, maintenance blackout for electrical upgrades. Cameras down from 11:40 to midnight precisely. Sarah waited until she was alone before unfolding the paper. A staff schedule showing James assigned to electrical systems during the maintenance window, and a sequence of numbers. The updated door code. The fingerprint requirement remained a significant obstacle, but not insurmountable for someone with her training. The next evening, Sarah parked 3 blocks from the club, dressed in nondescript black athletic wear that wouldn't draw attention if she were spotted but allowed full range of movement. She approached from the densely wooded area behind the facility, avoiding the main access points covered by perimeter cameras. The maintenance entrance James had identified was secured with a standard lock that yielded to her specialized tools in under 20 seconds. She moved through the darkened building with practiced precision, her path carefully planned to avoid the few security cameras still operating during the upgrade. At precisely 11:39, she reached the corridor outside Grant's office, pressed against the wall in the camera blind spot James had marked. 1 minute later, the red recording lights on all visible cameras blinked out simultaneously. Sarah moved immediately to the keypad, entering the code while extracting a specialized device from her pocket, a replica fingerprint membrane developed during her military operations, created using an impression from Grant's whiskey glass that James had secured 2 days earlier. The sophisticated lock hesitated for a heart-stopping moment before the magnetic seal released with a soft click. Inside, Grant's office reflected his personality. Ostentatious displays of wealth and achievement covering every surface. Trophy animals stared lifelessly from the walls, while photographs showed him alongside politicians and celebrities, all carefully positioned to impress visitors. Sarah ignored these distractions, moving directly to the concealed door leading to the archives. This secondary door used only the keypad system, yielding immediately to the code James had provided. Inside, climate-controlled air preserved hundreds of documents organized in meticulous filing systems. Sarah extracted a specialized camera from her pocket and began photographing everything related to the original land acquisition, working with the efficiency of someone who had cataloged intelligence materials under far more dangerous circumstances. Midway through her documentation, a particular folder caught her attention, labeled simply Water Diversion Project, Phase 1. Inside were the smoking guns her grandfather had insisted existed, engineered reports falsifying drought conditions, correspondence between Grant and county officials planning the strategic bankruptcy of targeted farms, and most damning, geological surveys showing the deliberate rerouting of natural aquifers away from Chen family land to create artificial water scarcity. Sarah's hands remained steady as she photographed each damning page, though her pulse quickened at finally holding tangible proof of the conspiracy. A separate folder contained the original deed to her grandfather's property, with handwritten notes calculating its potential value once developed into an exclusive membership community. The sudden sound of voices in the main office froze her in place. Through the partially open archive door, she could see flashlight beams sweeping the room. "Just a routine check," an unfamiliar voice was saying. "System flagged an anomaly when the power cycled. I'll handle it," came James's immediate response, tension evident in his voice. "Probably just the new security integration. Same thing happened during testing." The guards hesitated, their flashlights still probing the darkened office. Sarah remained motionless in the archive room, controlling her breathing as she'd been trained, the camera and documents concealed against her body. "Protocol says we should check all secured areas when there's an alert," the first guard insisted. "And I'm telling you it's a systems ghost," James countered. "Besides, that area requires Mr. Grant's authorization. You want to call him at midnight over a power fluctuation?" The mention of Grant seemed to give the guards pause. After what felt like an eternity, their flashlight beams retreated. "Fine. Log it as a system error during maintenance," the guard conceded reluctantly, but we're noting that full protocol wasn't followed. Once their footsteps faded, James appeared in the archive doorway, his face pale. 2 minutes, he whispered urgently. "They'll review the entry logs when systems come back online." Sarah nodded, quickly replacing the folders exactly as she'd found them. Within 90 seconds, both rooms were restored to their original condition, and she was moving silently back through the darkened club, the precious digital evidence secured in her specialized camera. Outside, as she melted into the shadows beyond the property line, Sarah finally allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. After 50 years, the truth was finally documented, but obtaining evidence was only the beginning. The real challenge would be forcing these powerful men to face justice in a county where they controlled nearly every institution of power. For that, she needed the most public stage possible, the tournament that was now just 24 hours away. Tournament day dawned bright and clear. Perfect conditions for the prestigious shooting event that had drawn Westridge County's elite. Luxury vehicles filled the club's expanded parking area, while caterers bustled about preparing elaborate refreshments for VIP guests. Local media had set up near the main competition area, preparing to cover what had become the social event of the season. Sarah arrived early, her sedan inconspicuous among the luxury cars. She wore simple black shooting attire, functional and regulation compliant, but lacking the designer logos and custom tailoring that adorned most competitors. Her equipment bag contained only standard gear, nothing that would draw attention or raise questions during the mandatory security check. At registration, she received her competitor packet and number, 23. Ironically, the same number her grandfather's farm had been assigned during the county's land redistribution program decades earlier. The coincidence felt appropriate for what she had planned. "Miss Chen," came Grant's voice from behind her, "I trust you're prepared for today's challenge." Sarah turned to find him resplendent in custom shooting attire, surrounded by a small entourage including 2 men she recognized from her research. Commissioner Bennett and Judge Raymond Wilson, who had signed the final eviction orders against multiple farm families, including hers. "As prepared as possible, Mr. Grant," she replied evenly. Grant's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Excellent. I've taken the liberty of adjusting the competition brackets. You'll be in my group for the preliminary rounds, so I can personally observe your technique." The implied threat was clear. He intended to watch her closely, perhaps hoping she would reveal something under pressure. Behind him, Bennett studied her with unexpected intensity, as though trying to place her face. "I'm honored by your attention," Sarah said, the deliberate humility causing a flicker of satisfaction in Grant's expression. Let him believe she was intimidated, it would make what followed all the more effective. As Sarah moved toward the preparation area, she noticed James watching their exchange from across the room, his weathered face expressionless as he methodically arranged equipment. Their eyes met briefly, a silent confirmation that everything was in place. The tournament began with ceremonial speeches from local officials, each lavishing praise on Westridge Development's community vision and Grant's philanthropic leadership. Sarah listened from the competitors' area, mentally identifying each speaker's role in the conspiracy she had uncovered. Commissioner Bennett spoke at length about transforming unproductive land into an economic powerhouse, never mentioning that his family's construction company had received millions in no-bid contracts during the war. Development. The preliminary competition rounds proceeded with mechanical precision, shooters rotating through various challenges designed to showcase different skills. Sarah maintained her strategy of controlled competence, scoring well enough to advance but deliberately placing middle of pack to avoid drawing additional scrutiny before the final stages. Grant, however, performed with theatrical excellence. His every successful shot met with applause from the sycophantic crowd. He took particular pleasure in commenting on other competitors' techniques, offering condescending advice that served primarily to emphasize his own expertise. During the midday break, Sarah noticed a new arrival that sent a jolt of concern through her carefully maintained composure. Thomas Levine, her former commanding officer, now working as private security consultant for wealthy clients. His presence wasn't coincidental. Someone had made connections that her sanitized background should have prevented. James managed to approach during the equipment check between rounds, ostensibly verifying her lane assignment. "Levine's here as Bennett's guest," he murmured while checking her lane number. "Started asking questions about you 10 minutes ago." Sarah nodded almost imperceptibly. Timeline accelerates. Preparation for contingency 3. The coded exchange was brief, but sufficient. James would ensure her digital evidence reached multiple destinations if she were compromised before the final stage. The flash drive concealed in her equipment contained everything she had documented, programmed to automatically upload to law enforcement agencies and media outlets, if not reset within 6 hours. The afternoon rounds narrowed the field significantly, with Sarah advancing to the semifinal group alongside Grant and 6 others, including 2 former military competitors whose techniques suggested special operations backgrounds. Their presence, and their occasional studied glances in her direction, suggested Levine had shared his suspicions with others who might recognize operational movement patterns. Finalist announcements in 30 minutes, came the official's voice over the loudspeaker. Final challenge preparations are underway at the wall. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to study the infamous wall, the shooting challenge that had become the club's signature spectacle. Unlike standard range setups, this was a massive concrete barrier rising 30 feet high at the far end of the property, with mechanized target systems and environmental controls designed to create nearly impossible shooting conditions. The distance markers indicated positions from 600 to 1,000 yards. Extreme range shooting that would challenge even the most elite marksman. "Impressive, isn't it?" Grant appeared beside her, gesturing proudly toward the structure. "Designed it myself. The concrete is specially formulated to absorb bullets without fragmentation or ricochets. The electronic target system can create moving patterns that mimic combat scenarios." "It's quite remarkable," Sarah acknowledged truthfully. "No one has ever completed the final challenge," Grant continued, watching her face carefully. "The combination of distance, wind variables, and target movement is prohibitive, even for those with, shall we say, specialized training." The emphasis on his last words confirmed Sarah's suspicions. Levine had shared his concerns, and Grant was now certain she wasn't who she claimed to be. Yet he seemed almost pleased by this knowledge, confident that whatever her true identity, his trap was now set. Competitors Chen, Grant, Westfield, and Ramirez will advance to the final round, announced the head judge through the PA system. "Please report to Preparation Area C for equipment verification." Grant's smile widened to a predatory grin. "It appears we'll both be facing the wall, Miss Chen. I look forward to seeing how your self-taught skills measure against such an extreme challenge." As he walked away, Sarah caught sight of James across the range, giving her the predetermined signal. All systems ready. In less than an hour, everything would converge at the wall. Her opportunity to expose 5 decades of corruption, Grant's attempt to publicly humiliate her, and the final reckoning for men who had destroyed lives with impunity. She checked her watch. 4:15 p.m. By 5 o'clock, Westridge's prestigious tournament would transform into something none of these powerful men could possibly anticipate. A palpable tension settled over the Westridge grounds as spectators gathered around the wall for the tournament's culminating event. VIP seating had been arranged for county officials and major donors, providing them perfect viewing angles of what Grant clearly expected to be a crowning demonstration of his superiority. Media representatives adjusted cameras and checked lighting as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the range. Sarah underwent the final equipment inspection with calm detachment, submitting her standard rifle for examination by officials who seemed particularly thorough with her gear compared to other finalists. She noticed Levine observing the process from nearby, his expression inscrutable as he whispered occasionally to Commissioner Bennett. "Rifle's clean," the inspector finally announced, returning her weapon. "Standard competition, configuration, no modifications." Levine's slight frown suggested he'd hoped for disqualifying evidence. Sarah accepted her rifle with appropriate gratitude, her eyes briefly meeting James's across the preparation area. He gave an almost imperceptible nod, confirmation that everything was in place despite the heightened security. The finalists were introduced with ceremonial flourish, each receiving polite applause as they took their positions. When Sarah's name was announced, the response was notably cooler, a reminder that despite advancing to the finals, she remained an outsider in their exclusive world. Grant, naturally, received thunderous approval, acknowledging the adulation with practiced humility that didn't quite mask his evident self-satisfaction. He took position 2, directly beside Sarah at position 3, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. "Ladies and gentlemen," began the announcer, "our finalists will now face the wall challenge, a test of skill, precision, and mental fortitude under extraordinary conditions. Each competitor will attempt 5 shots at progressively difficult targets, with environmental variables controlled by our automated systems." Grant leaned slightly toward Sarah, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "I designed this challenge specifically to identify those with military-grade training," he murmured. "Civilian shooters physically cannot compensate for the variables correctly. Their bodies simply haven't been conditioned for it." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her mind rapidly processed the implications. This wasn't merely a shooting challenge, it was Grant's personal screening system for identifying those with specialized backgrounds. "First target, stationary, 600 yards, no environmental modifications," announced the rangemaster. The first round proceeded without incident, all 4 finalists hitting the basic target. The crowd applauded appreciatively but without particular enthusiasm. At this level of competition, such shots were expected. Second target, stationary, 800 yards, moderate wind simulation. Again, all competitors succeeded, though Ramirez's shot drifted slightly from center, drawing a sympathetic murmur from spectators. Third target, moving lateral pattern, 800 yards, variable wind conditions. At this increased difficulty, Westfield missed entirely, while Ramirez hit the outer ring. Grant executed a technically perfect shot, drawing appreciative applause. Sarah matched his performance precisely, placing her bullet exactly adjacent to his in the center ring. Grant's eyes narrowed slightly at this demonstration of skill that couldn't be attributed to luck. Nearby, Levine's attention visibly intensified. Fourth target, moving vertical pattern, 900 yards, complex wind simulation and barometric pressure adjustment. This challenge eliminated Ramirez, whose shot missed by several inches. Grant again performed impressively, compensating perfectly for the difficult conditions. Sarah, however, noticed a subtle inconsistency in the wind flags compared to the announced conditions. The wall systems were programmed to display one set of environmental data while actually implementing another. It was a deliberate deception, designed to trip competitors, relying on standard calculation methods. Sarah adjusted accordingly, delivering another perfect shot that matched Grant's with suspicious precision. A hushed conversation erupted among the judges and officials, while Grant's previously confident expression hardened into something more predatory. He had clearly expected her to fail this manipulated challenge. "Our final target represents the ultimate test," announced the rangemaster, his voice carrying across the now silent audience. "Moving diagonal pattern, 1,000 yards, with randomized environmental variables unknown to competitors until moment of firing." This was the wall's infamous impossible challenge, the conditions meant to ensure failure for even exceptional marksmen. The system would randomize wind, temperature, and barometric pressure settings seconds before each shot, allowing insufficient time for proper calculations. "Before we proceed," Grant suddenly interrupted, raising his hand with practiced authority, "I'd like to propose a special demonstration for our distinguished guests." The unexpected deviation drew murmurs from the crowd as Grant continued. "As club president and course designer, I'm invoking the exhibition rule." He turned toward the officials' table. "Miss Chen and I will demonstrate the wall's ultimate capability, the dynamic security simulation." The head judge looked momentarily confused before recognition dawned. That's not part of the standard tournament, Mr. Grant. The dynamic simulation is designed for tactical training, not competition. Nevertheless, I believe our guests would find it educational, Grant insisted, his tone making it clear this wasn't actually a request. Commissioner Bennett has expressed particular interest in our security applications. Bennett nodded from the VIP section, his expression suggesting this had been prearranged. Sarah maintained her outward composure while rapidly reassessing the situation. The dynamic simulation wasn't in any materials James had provided. This was Grant's trap springing closed. The judge reluctantly nodded. Very well. Dynamic security simulation for final demonstration. Both remaining competitors will fire simultaneously at randomized targets under combat simulation conditions. Grant turned to Sarah with undisguised triumph. I hope your self-taught skills are up to this challenge, Miss Chen. These conditions approximate actual battlefield variables. Only those with specialized experience tend to perform adequately. The range crew quickly adjusted the systems, replacing standard targets with specialized versions that would emerge unpredictably from different positions along the wall. The crowd's excitement grew palpably as they realized they were witnessing something beyond the normal competition. Sarah glanced toward James, who appeared visibly concerned by this deviation from their planned scenario. She gave him the slightest nod of reassurance as she adjusted her position. Whatever Grant had planned, it had only accelerated her own timeline. Competitors ready, called the rangemaster. Dynamic simulation commencing in 3, 2, 1. The wall's surface suddenly transformed, sections sliding open to reveal multiple targets at varying distances, moving in unpredictable patterns while environmental controls created swirling wind conditions visible in the disturbed dust across the range. The challenge wasn't merely difficult, it was deliberately impossible for anyone without combat experience to even identify the primary targets among the decoys. Grant fired immediately, his shot striking a high-value target with precision that confirmed his own military background. He turned to Sarah with expectant satisfaction, clearly anticipating her failure. Instead, Sarah aligned her rifle with fluid grace, her body shifting into a stance no civilian shooter would recognize. The optimized position taught only within special operations units for extreme condition accuracy. Without hesitation, she fired 5 rapid shots in precise sequence. Absolute silence fell over the previously noisy range. On the wall, 5 high-value targets displayed direct hits in perfect center mass, a performance beyond even what Grant had demonstrated. The silence shattered as shocked exclamations erupted from the crowd. Grant's expression transformed from smugness to white-hot fury as he realized his trap had backfired spectacularly. Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, U.S. Army Special Operations, she announced when Levine demanded her identity. Though that's not why I'm here today. She turned toward the confused spectators. 50 years ago today, the Chen family farm was seized through what was described as legal foreclosure proceedings after an unprecedented drought destroyed their crops while leaving neighboring properties mysteriously unaffected. This is hardly the venue for historical grievances, Bennett interjected, attempting damage control. I'm not discussing water rights, Commissioner, Sarah cut him off cleanly. I'm discussing criminal conspiracy, environmental sabotage, and fraud committed by county officials in collaboration with Westridge Development. James wheeled forward a display screen and connected it to Sarah's evidence drive. The screen illuminated with the first of dozens of scanned documents, the original county water management plans showing deliberate diversion structures installed upstream from targeted farm properties. These records show that the drought affecting immigrant-owned farms in this valley was engineered, Sarah explained. Commissioner Bennett's father authorized construction of diversion channels that rerouted natural aquifer flow away from specific properties, including my grandfather's farm. The screen changed to show correspondence between county officials and Maxwell Grant, dated years before the supposed drought. The highlighted section outlined a 5-year plan to acquire undervalued agricultural properties for future luxury development. These documents were secured from Westridge's own archives, Sarah continued. They detail how artificial water scarcity was created to force specific landowners into financial ruin, while neighboring properties controlled by Westridge associates remained irrigated. My name is Michael Wang, announced an elderly man who stepped forward from the crowd. I owned the orchard adjacent to Chen Weilong's farm. I was there when the water mysteriously stopped flowing to our properties, while Grant development lands remained green. He pointed a gnarled finger directly at Commissioner Bennett. I was there when your father and his men installed pumps at night, redirecting our water to properties they controlled. I testified about it at the county hearing, but my statement mysteriously disappeared from official records. His unexpected testimony seemed to break a dam of silence. From different points in the crowd, other voices began emerging. Descendants of displaced farmers, former county employees who had witnessed document shredding, an elderly secretary who had typed many of the incriminating letters now displayed on screen. For decades, fear and power had maintained silence. Now, in the face of irrefutable evidence and Sarah's courageous confrontation, that silence was shattering. State police officers emerged from the club entrance. Special Agent Diana Martinez, State Bureau of Investigation, announced their leader. This facility is now a secured scene in an active investigation into public corruption, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. She turned toward Bennett, Wilson, and Grant. Gentlemen, you'll need to come with us for questioning. As chaos erupted across the once prestigious gathering, Sarah finally allowed herself to meet the eyes of the man who had dismissed her as a simple woman out of her depth just weeks earlier. Grant's face reflected the dawning realization that his carefully constructed empire, built on stolen dreams and corrupt foundations, was collapsing around him, all because he had underestimated the quiet determination of a woman with justice in her heart and truth in her hands. The wall, designed to humiliate challengers to his authority, had instead become the backdrop for his very public downfall.